Welcome back to another episode of Inside SFPS. My name is Cody Donarski, Public Information Officer for Santa Fe Public Schools. And today, my guest is Miss Lisa Randall. Miss Lisa Randall, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here today. This is exciting.
Of course. Happy to have you. So just because I don't know your position exactly, I know what you do, and we've worked together a lot, but what exactly is your position with the district?
So I am the district's Sustainability Program Coordinator.
Sustainability Coordinator. So everything green, everything, I know you do with recycling and energy and the solar, all those beautiful solar rays you see in the around the district. Yep. That all comes from you, right?
That's right.
Awesome. So we'll get started. So originally you are from sort of my neck of the woods up in the Northeast. You're from Maine, correct?
Yeah, Maniac. I'm a maniac.
And then from Maine, so that's where you grew up, went to high school, and then you graduated and moved to upstate New York? Yeah, I would call that upstate.
Well, I spent my entire K-12 years in Maine. My mom still lives in the house I grew up in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to go back and visit, and a little surreal all at the same time. But I went to college in upstate New York, Skidmore College, and from there I spent a year in Central America building houses, and I became a bit of a wanderer at that point. So I spent lots of time in various states throughout the U.S.
So when you were in Central America, did you do that on your own? Were you with a group? Was that with, I know Jack Lane worked with the Peace Corps and was down in Guatemala there. Is that kind of what you had done, or how did you end up in Central America?
It was with a private group, Architects and Planners in Solidarity with Nicaragua. And if you know about the Nicaraguan struggle for independence and self-rulership, that was happening in the 80s, and I went to help build houses and support the revolution. I really believe that, self-determination and equal opportunity for all was what mattered and what was important, and that's what I wanted to do with my life, and I had a great opportunity to go there and do that each and every day.
That's awesome. So when after Central America, what was your kind of next step?
I came back to the U.S., and I have to say I was a little wondering what I should do with my time. And, there's so much about our country that's amazing, and there's so much about our country that we need to change. And so I really wanted to be in a place that was questioning, that was growing, that was evolving, that wasn't making assumptions. I wanted to be with people who cared about all and cared about equal access and cared about respect for everyone and opportunity for everyone. So that wasn't necessarily readily available, right? And so I spent a lot of time traveling. I guess I was a radical hippie in a bunch of ways, just kind of going from place to place and making myself useful and learning and growing at the same time.
What was the favorite place that you kind of spent during that period of kind of wandering? What was your favorite place that you had visited or spent time or did anything in?
I think Vermont. There were just a lot of people, like-minded folks, who were trying to make the world a better place and use their talent and their time and their energy to do that. And I met a lot of folks who were just doing good things. They'd wake up each day and, do what they could to achieve their dream.
Vermont's such a unique place. I'd gone skiing in Killington in the winter, and it's just so different. And even, being from New York and driving through kind of the upstate part, everyone pictures New York as this concrete jungle. But
right.
Once you get past Westchester and Orange County, it's very different.
Absolutely.
But it's just such a unique place. It's so different. I remember I was staying at my buddy's place, and we would snowmobile to get food.
Yeah.
We went to breakfast and, people would park their snowmobiles outside. You wouldn't see any cars. You would just see snowmobiles and,
yep.
It was just such a unique experience. And it's definitely a different place than anywhere else that I've ever been.
Yeah. Well, there's, when you live rurally, and I think it's that way in New Mexico, you realize you have to depend on one another. Mm-hmm. You have to be there for each other because life is harder when you live rurally and you don't have a store or a gas station or a charging station right down the street, right? And so you realize that you need each other.
Yeah.
And it builds a social fabric that is really beautiful.
It's definitely neighbors help neighbors.
Yep.
And I remember we had gotten there and my buddy's dad had chopped a bunch of wood the week or two before that he had gotten there. And his neighbor came by and was like, hey, do you need any wood? He's like, I got a bunch. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually running low. I was going to run out, back into town, which was probably 30, 45 minutes away by car. are, not including like the snow and ice and,
whatever weather conditions you had to overcome on the way. Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'll take some, like, I'll get you back. I'll pick you up another quart or two.
Yeah.
And it was just such a unique experience to see people just rely off of each other and not rely on everything around them. Like I rely on Smith's and Target and, Chipotle and all the things around me. And when you live in such a rural area, you rely on your neighbors and it's such a unique experience. So I definitely can see that.
Well, it's a different use of resources too, and a different appreciation for resources. Mm-hmm. And I think when we think about sustainability, that's part of that, kind of circular thinking. How can we share this? How can we produce this? How can we use this in the most efficient way? How can we reuse this? How can we share this resource that is limited? And I think when you live rurally, you have to think like that. One, because you don't necessarily have the fiscal resources to just go out and be wasteful, but also because you realize the value of things.
Yeah, you appreciate everything you have much more than, you do in the city. And I'm, hand up, I live in the city. I've lived in an urban area for most of my life. And it's totally true. You become wasteful. And, luckily my parents took me camping when I was younger. And even that, when the closest grocery store is 45 minutes away, you aren't wasteful because you can't just drive 5 minutes down the road to pick up bread or pick up milk or pick up eggs. Like you really do cherish the goods that you have.
Well, I remember when I told my mom about this job, and she said, well, what do you do? And I explained a little bit to her, and she said, oh, interesting. So basically you try to get everyone to live the way we did when I was a kid and the way that I used to try to get you to live, like turn out the lights, don't be wasteful, close the refrigerator door. Like, that's part of it. Yep.
So would you say that's where kind of your sustainability came from, is from your mom? Like, was it stuff that seemed to be ingrained in you from a young age?
I think both my parents, they both grew up very close to the bone, as you might say, and didn't have a lot of resources and grew gardens, right? Grew their own food, hunted for their own food, gathering eggs in northern Maine, with no central heating, those leave a mark. And so my parents were very appreciative of what they had, but they also wanted to make sure that we didn't take things for granted and that we understood the value of things and the value of working hard and earning your way. And I'm extremely appreciative. I think the thing I'm most grateful for from them is a work ethic. Mm-hmm. And them instilling in me that mattered. Yeah. And that it's important to carry your own weight when you can, how you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, when you have to be out chopping wood because that's your source of heat.
Yep.
My guess, if I had to take a shot in the dark, you probably didn't have central air or heat.
We had a big boiler in the basement, which cost a whole lot of money. So we burned a lot of wood.
Yeah, I was going to say probably wood burning.
We chopped wood, we stacked wood, we carried wood, you bet.
Yeah. So
from a very young age.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. So after you graduated college and you kind of went about your wandering of the U.S., what brought you to Santa Fe? Or New Mexico? What brought you to this part of the country?
I had a friend, or the group I was traveling with, we had a friend who just had a baby, and the dad really didn't want to be involved, and she needed help. And we had the means and I'd say the lack of commitment anywhere else to be able to just hit the road. And we lived up in Chimayo, and we helped her with the baby and helped her take care of the house and the commitments and worked odd jobs to bring in money. And I felt like I was home, frankly. Chimayo is so much like the town that I grew up in. Folks who all knew each other, who took care of each other, who lived simply, who lived rurally. And I didn't know much about New Mexico, being a Mainer, and it was my first time here, and that was back in the late 80s, and I just loved it. It felt like home right away.
It's interesting. Anyone who's listened to every episode of the podcast might find that there's been a theme, and I promise it is not intentional, but the last 3 or 4 episodes have all had connections back to New York and the Northeast. Northeast. So, the reoccurring theme is that, a lot of people are just like transplants here from the Northeast. And listeners have heard me say that my dad had always told me, like, when I said that I was going to move out here, is that you're going to miss the green, you're going to miss the grass, you're going to get sick of the dirt and the sand or whatever. And like, there hasn't been a day that goes by that I'm like, man, I miss grass. I miss cutting grass in, 90 degrees and 100% humidity. I love this landscape. I love this part of the country, and it's so unique and so different. And I feel like maybe that's why us Northeasterners are so drawn to the Southwest, is it's almost drastically 180 degrees different than where we're from. We're used to trees and these hills and like
an ocean and 50-mile wide lakes.
Exactly. And out here, it's not like that. And I think part of me, I had always had a draw to the Southwest because you would see it in TV and in the movies, and it just was so different. And I'm like, I want to be somewhere that's different than what I know. I never wanted to be in an area that I was familiar with. I wanted to push myself and push my boundaries and push my knowledge of what I knew and what I was used to. So
I think a big part too is the people. There's just something incredibly special about New Mexicans, and northern New Mexico is where I've spent most of my time when I've been in New Mexico, and the warmth, the humor, this kind of can-do spirit, no matter the odds. The embracing of other, like I just
feels very family.
It does. There just was an embracing of who I was immediately.
Yeah, and I think what's even greater is that they don't care if you came from somewhere else. It's almost like you're here now, so you're family with us. And so many people, when I'm obviously very not open about where I'm from, but I talk about being from New York and coming here, and people are like, well, you're here now, and this is home, and this is home to me and home to so many of us that have moved here, ended up here at some point in our life. So then how did you came here with a friend and helped take care of the baby and worked a bunch of odd jobs. How did you end up at the district? Did one of those odd jobs turn into the district, or how did that end up coming to be?
I became an AmeriCorps volunteer through the community college, and I was placed at Agua Fria Elementary, which is now Nye Early Childhood Center, but was an elementary school for decades out at the end of Agua Fria. And I was there 4 days a week, so I was a full-time volunteer, and I basically said to the principal, I'm here to do what you need. What do you need? And I ended up doing lots of things which were in my wheelhouse, like fixing things or painting things or building things, but always with kids. And it happened to be with kids who were having a hard time being in class that day, they were having a meltdown, or there just was some issue where they needed to go do something physical. They needed to get out of the classroom and get outside. And so I spent my day doing awesome projects on the campus at Agua Fria with kids. And I said, I want to do this for a job. I want this to be what I do every day. And so I went back to school and got another degree, this time in teaching, licensure up at Northern. And I was working full-time at Agua Fria. At that time, you could be hired to be a teacher if you were in a teaching program. And you had a certain amount of time to get your degree. And I did that. I worked full-time at Agua Fria as a teacher, fifth grade teacher, and I went to school on the weekends and in the summer and at night. And here I am, 22 years later, still an employee of Santa Fe Public Schools. So it's been a really cool journey. Yeah, it really has.
That's incredible. So were you, because of your background, was sciences your main focus, or did you have another subject that you found a great interest in teaching?
I'd say social studies was my favorite subject to teach because, I've always had a social justice kind of lens on the world. I knew I was gay from being a wee one. And so when you're part of a marginalized group, you have a different window on the world. And at least that was my experience. And so I always had this idea of using my time and my talents for the greater good and inclusion and bringing people into the fold. And I think that's part of always feeling excluded. And so social studies to me was and is one of the most impactful content areas that we can teach and unfold unfortunately, it gets taught the least anymore, right? It's ELA, it's math, fit in some science, and maybe read some stuff about social studies, right? I mean, it's, or study MLK on MLK Day, right? I think we feel that in our culture now, that we are not grounded in our history and a true full history that honors the good and the bad. And so for me, social studies was really my favorite subject to teach. And I found that kids really engaged. And so I was more of a thematic teacher. I don't think I do very well now where we have 50 minutes for ELA and 50 minutes for math. And I don't think that way, and I never taught that way. And it merged nicely into this sustainability realm, my point of view and my worldview.
That's interesting. And I find so many teachers that I've spoken with, on the podcast and off, that their favorite subject or what their background is in is never the subject that they enjoy teaching.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I totally would have been like, oh, science is right up your alley, working in the earth sciences and stuff like that. So to hear that social studies was kind of the one for you was very interesting. So how long did you teach for?
10 years.
10 years. And then is that when you moved into this role, or how did that work? Because I'm sure, and this is me just taking a shot in the dark, that sustainability and a sustainability department wasn't something that was around for very long. That's something that's probably on the newer side of things.
That's definitely correct. I taught for 10 years, and then I realized that I didn't want to be in that structured classroom environment, but I also wanted to reach more kids. And so I thought being a principal would be an impactful role to play. And so I went back to school again, and I got my master's in instructional leadership. But in the time that I went back to school, and I was still teaching, but I also said that I really needed to leave the classroom, and whatever came about is what would come. And I wanted to make a space for that principal to fill that slot and not make her wait while I figured something else out, right? And in the interim, this energy conservation job came. That's what it was. It was energy conservation when we started, because it was when we had the stock market crash and the real estate market crash and the recession, and we were cutting millions of dollars out of the budget every year. And we looked at our, as a district, this was before I started in this role, Bobby Gutierrez was our superintendent at the time. They looked at the utility budget and they said, well, we've got to be able to spend or save some money here. Mm-hmm. And so they hired an energy conservation person. That job came available. I didn't really have training, but they knew they wanted someone who had experience in education. And because we're such a particular culture, education is so unique. And so I was hired. There was no program, which was daunting, but also awesome, because I got to build the program based on who we were as a district, what our needs were. I got to, really kind of roll things out in a way that worked for us, and go after savings or go after projects as they authentically came about. So it was really, I've been the only one in this position. Yeah. We started in 2010, and I was the first person to hold the position. So I feel really fortunate to have had that opportunity.
That's incredible. So when you moved into that position, obviously you built it up. What were some of the first things that you had looked at? What were some of the first kind of accomplishments that you had made? Because I was going to ask, I was like, that's probably around 09, 10.
Yep.
What were some of kind of the first things that you did when you got on the job to kind of help with the budget and fix some of those deficits?
Well, we looked at where we were spending money, right? All of our utilities, where do we spend the most? It was with P&M on electricity, right? Electric lights, electric heat, everything that we were plugging in. And electricity was probably, I think it was like almost $2 million. It was more than all of the other utilities combined. Wow. So we started doing lighting retrofits. We did our motion sensors, which I know make people nuts because they have to get up and do the hokey pokey in the middle of whatever they're doing. But we thank you for that. And it's good to move around anyway and do the hokey pokey. But we looked at things, anything that was inefficient or wasteful with lighting. Mm-hmm. And one of our board members, when this position was created, said, I don't know if we need a new position. We need more teachers. We need more EAs. We need more nurses. So this position has to save as much as it costs the first year, or I don't think we should do it anymore. And that was Frank Montano. And I love that. I took that as a personal challenge because, he was right. We do need more teachers. We do need more nurses. We do need more social workers. But because of this position, we save compared to our utility bills in 2010 compared to today, we save almost $500,000 a year what we spend now compared to then. And so we can hire more teachers and nurses and social workers and secretaries. And, this last year has been difficult. The cost of natural gas has increased 40%. Our electric bill has gone up 15%. We blew our budget by a couple $100,000 this year because of our COVID practices, right? We're flushing the buildings in the morning, flushing them at the end of the day, keeping the fans going all the time. So we're just using more energy, but it's to keep our people safe.
Yeah.
So we have to.
And with the HVAC systems, with the higher filters, they're having to run harder.
You bet.
And so, that's interesting, but that was kind of one of the prices that wasn't really a factor into COVID, and
yep.
It's what we needed to do. It's not that we're begrudging that we're
Absolutely
having to do it.
Not.
It's just kind of the cost of what running. I mean, every room has an air purifier.
That's right.
We have upgraded HVAC systems with MERV 13, I believe.
Yeah, where we can.
Yeah, where we can. Yeah, and those make the HVAC systems work harder. That's. A lot of those lighting changes was probably before LED was a big thing, right?
You bet. And LED wasn't affordable either. Yeah. LED right now is comparable to fluorescence. In fact, I was just reading something the other day that by January 2023, we're not going to import fluorescent or non-compliant bulbs anymore. And we're not going to be able to even sell them by mid-2023. And so go LED. They're they're a comparable price. They'll save you money. They'll last longer. The quality of light is better. You don't have that humming and blinking and strange things that everybody hates about fluorescence.
And for me, when I shine a camera at it, it's not giving me the waves and the little flickering and all of that. Yeah, LED about all the way. Yep. So as time has gone on, so if this was 2009, 10, so you've been in this position about 12 years.
That's right.
What would you call some of the big goals of what your department has done? Because, there's some of the visible goals of the solar panels that are at Nina Otero and at Santa Fe High.
13 sites we have solar.
Yeah, 13 sites. And,
yeah.
And is it Kearney that is more than 50% run by solar?
Yeah, about 65.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest accomplishments over the last, 10 to 12 years for the department?
Well, I think solarization is the big one, Cody. It's so important. And there's this whole movement now to electrify buildings because you can generate electricity through solar. And these systems, they'll last for 30 years. And that's with today's technology. Who knows what it's going to be like in the future? And these systems pay for themselves in terms of energy bill savings in 12 to 14 years. After that, it's basically free energy. And so the more that we solarize, the better off we are in the short term and in the long term. And so that's a big one. Right now, the district's 25% solar powered, which is pretty fabulous for a public school district this size.
And 29 schools, 11,000 plus students, and how many in faculty?
About 2,000.
A 0.25% of electric is, that's pretty incredible.
It really is incredible. And then I think something that you don't see that you might know about because sometimes you want to crank up the heat or crank up the AC, but we climate control our buildings. And so in the evenings or on the weekends or during vacations or if a building's closed for the summer, we're not heating and cooling an unused space. We keep it at a minimal temperature, but we don't leave the lights on when people aren't there, and we don't leave the heating and the cooling on when people aren't there. And you can't do that manually. You just can't have somebody run around, hitting the thermostat to where it's supposed to be at the start of the day or at the end of the day. And so we do that through HVAC controls, and that has made a tremendous impact in terms of savings. You don't really see it, and you might feel it because, Sometimes you do want to
It's a little chilly sometimes in my office.
Sometimes, that's right. And but we never want people to be uncomfortable. You know, we shoot for 72 degrees year round, which is a pretty comfortable temp, I think. And, you know, we encourage people to wear a sweater or wear a lighter shirt. So,
or open the windows, yeah.
Or open the windows if you need to, which is wonderful.
The other one that I like that I also don't think gets talked about as much as the food waste. That one
so
is
important.
Huge. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what the program or how we do with food waste?
You bet. In 21 of our schools, Reunity Resources, which is out at the old community farm at the end of Agua Fria, wonderful local husband-wife team, and then all the partners that they've brought to their incredible program. They pick up our food waste every Monday and Thursday to the tune of about 5,000 pounds of food waste a day, which is horrifying. But at the same time, it used to go in the landfill. And when it went in the landfill, it created methane, which is, you know, we talk a lot about CO2. Methane is 9 times more impactful in terms of climate crisis than CO2. And so keeping food waste out of the landfill is a vital strategy around climate mitigation. And so we've been able to minimize our costs for trash, right? Because we're not sending so much trash to the landfill. Our custodians are great. Our kids are great about how to collect it because it's a different process than just throwing everything in the trash. But it's really amazing. And then we get Reunity Resources creates all kinds of fantastic soil products from that food waste. And so that ends up back on our campuses in our school gardens and on our landscaping. So it's a really cool, full circle, planet positive, fiscal wash, right? We don't pay more to do that. We just use our fiscal resources in a better way to do something really beneficial.
The work you guys do is so incredible, and it makes me so happy. It's
awesome.
so exciting.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming. And if you want to learn more about the work that Lisa and the sustainability department do, you can head to our website. Under the departments page, there's the sustainability page. It goes into detail about all the amazing things that the sustainability department does and really just the amazing work that Lisa and her team do. So I want to thank you for that. And to end the podcast, I'm going to ask the question that I ask all of our guests. What is the best piece of advice or guidance that you have ever received from a teacher?
You know, teachers have been so impactful in my life, and so it's hard to choose. But I would say it was a teacher at the community college, a professor, and she said, do what you love, the rest will follow. And it sounds simple, but it has been a guiding light of mine for a number of years now. So as much as we can, do what we love, the rest will follow.